Hey, Ainehi. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Hello.
Excellent. Hi.
I'm
Sorry
okay.
to sorry to whoever was here, and we're gonna send out some tweets and things like that to make sure that everyone knows where we are. Right?
Cool.
All right. And I have the pile of books right here.
Oh wow. Look at that.
I know you read some online, right? On
I
ebook.
did. I did. I read some on ebook. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm in the what's it called? I'm in the UK, so they're all in the bookstores. Yeah,
Oh, great. I'm just doing one last post on Instagram
great.
for our stuff. But yeah. I'm really looking forward to this chat. This is the second time we're doing it in a row, right?
Yes. And yeah, I don't know what happened before, but I didn't realize they would kill off the entire link. So that's annoying.
It's okay. It's all right. Okay, let's do this.
All right. So, how's it going? Where are
I'm,
you?
I'm okay. I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm in my office, as you can
Mhm.
see.
Yeah, I love it.
Thank you. I just taught like literally, I had to end class 20 minutes earlier
Uh
so
huh.
that I could be here. Yeah. So I'm happy to be here. Where are you?
I came to see friends in London, so I'm in my friend's apartment. And it's just suddenly the clouds have gathered. It's very bleak.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening here. Nothing
Okay.
exciting. All right, so off we go. Should we do a little bit of what we did last year, which is this kind of the what we say in this idea of a breakdown, to just
Mhm.
quickly talk about what this prize is, why do we care, right?
Right.
So I'm just going to start by quickly saying, um, um, like we already have a comment from someone. Is the Booker Prize more prestigious than the Nobel Prize for
That's a
Literature?
very good question. Thank you for that.
Is
I
it a
think we should throw
yeah?
it into the conversation.
All
Uh,
right, you go. Why is this prize such a big deal?
okay. Well, I think for me, it's a big deal because it is industry driven.
Mm-hmm.
So it's essentially the publishing engine and the global publishing machinery coming together and backing a particular book,
Right.
right? Which is why $50,000, to be honest, is not the most money in the entire world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what the author and the publisher of their book is getting at the end of the day is that the moment your book even enters a long list, you are in the radar of a global cohort of publishers. So it means that you're going to move units. It means that you're going to sell tons of books. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really the industry creating a system for itself, you
Yeah.
know, to shape culture. The Nobel Prize is a different ball game entirely. It's a prize that is not driven by the industry at all. It's driven by, I don't know, something very eclectic.
And mysterious.
To be I don't know. I feel like they stare into a crystal ball to
Mhm.
decide who wins. There is zero logic to it. It is very much based on writers as opposed to on the industry. Now, the Nobel Prize is not the only prize that does that. The Wyndham Campbell Prize also does that. It's about the writers. But even with the Wyndham Campbell Prize, there is a logic to the people who win. Nobel Prizes, nobody knows. And the pool is the entire world. So
Mhm.
I think that kind of magical nature of it and the $1 million kind of adds a certain type of prestige and
Mhm.
elitism to it. But I would say that industry wise, the Booker, I think, is pretty
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. And the focus is on the singular book rather than the writer's entire
Right,
life's
right,
work, which
right,
is what you're trying to
right.
explain. And just kind of historically speaking, the Booker starts in the UK in 1969. And one of the things that's interesting about the Booker that it almost kind of tends to perpetuate scandals and debates, and some of those are are interesting. Some are a little bit fabricated, or sometimes not even entirely true. You know, as you know, you know, it's a kind of a, because it's the UK and it's the UK publishing industry, it tends to include, or rather validate, Anglophone, post-colonial, Commonwealth writers, and it's one of those prizes where we can say, even though of course it's dominantly white, it is Western prize, it tends to have a lot of diversity, and it's kind of like the, you know, the book that wins spurs a lot of writing on like post-colonial theory and, you know, academic production and things like that. So that's also very interesting when you think about it. So, you know, you're thinking about it starts in 1969. V.S. Naipaul wins right away. 2 years later, very soon you have Nadine Gordimer. You know, you have Ruth Power Jabwala, then you have Rushdie, Coetzee, all these people. So African writers, Caribbean writers, South Asian writers, they have quite a focus on these. One of the scandals a few years ago was when Margaret Atwood and Bernardine Evaristo won, and everybody was annoyed, because I think a Black woman had not received this prize before, and then she was forced to share it. But the double prize tends to be a Booker thing. So Neville Gordimer and Stanley Middleton were double prized in
I didn't know
1973.
that.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, and then Michael Ondatier for English Patient and Barry Unsworth also uh, were forced to double up in 1992. So it's a thing, you know. I mean, of course, within that we can't say, you know, we can easily say Margaret Atwood had already won before, so there was no need. I would say there's no need, but
Yeah,
they got very fixated on the book, you know.
I
So
that is still going to be a mystery to us, and
yeah,
there are things that we probably can't share right here about some details about what went down. But
yeah.
I mean, that's a case where I do want to kind of push back on your
Hmm.
point that the Booker Prize is diverse,
Hmm.
because there's a way that Black women have, not been recognized in this prize, which is another problem that the Nobel Prize has. Because it's easy to say it's diverse when you think of the fact that Black men or
Yeah,
men of color are represented. But I
yeah,
mean, a Black woman has, well, I guess, Toni Morrison,
yeah.
right, but at least as somebody coming from the continent, an African woman has never, a Black African woman has
No,
never won the Nobel Prize. And I don't even think the Booker as well. And Bernardine was going to be kind of the
yeah,
first, and she had to share the prize.
yeah.
Someone didn't think to see, look, her
Mhm.
book is brilliant, and this is a significant historical moment. Let's
Yeah.
not muddy the waters in any
Mhm.
way. So I don't know, prize politics and representation is a matter that, darling, we can talk from now till
I
2 weeks.
know.
So yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I completely agree with you, and it's no secret to whoever's watching that both of us are passionate about African literature and very much want, an African woman in particular to win this prize. We've had Ben Okri in the past win it, but we've had Maza Mengiste nominated, we've had Latifa Mohammed nominated, Sitsi Dangaremba.
It's like we get even what's her name? No, Violet Bulawayo
She
has
was,
been nominated
yeah,
before. It's like we are favorites for long listing and short listing.
yeah.
So when are we going to get it? Is this our year?
Yeah, is this our year with no Violet Bulawayo's glory, right? We'll find out. And I think a few other elements about this particular prize is that in 1991 there was a little mini revolt in the prize makers community, because apparently 60% of the novels that year were published by women writers, yet not a single woman was even shortlisted.
Hmm.
I don't know who, I don't remember now who won that year, but that year people were so outraged. Some critics were so outraged that the Orange Prize, Women's Prize for Fiction,
I
came about.
see. I see. I see. Prizes birthing other prizes, you know?
Exactly. So, that begat that, and that's cool. And then I think maybe you can say a little bit more about the publicity driven industry agenda. Um, what happens? So they have the long list, then the short list. Why? It's, of course, it's prestigious. Any prize is prestigious. In this case, there is a bunch of money. It's certainly not the richest prize.
Mm-hmm.
But what Booker does for the book, the actual book, is very different than every other prize. I
Right.
think you have a theory on that. You have some thoughts on that, right?
No, I mean, I think that the value of a prize, the
Mm-hmm.
impact of a prize, it's not always tied to the prize money.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have the richest prize in the world that just, lines the pocket of the writer
Yeah.
and doesn't really necessarily, you know, inspire readers to buy
Mhm.
the book in a large scale. The Booker
Yeah.
Prize is different. It's $50,000. With inflation and everything, darling, that is actually not a lot of money, right?
Right.
But what then happens is that the writer is able to sell a ton of books because, again, as I said earlier, it is a prize that is driven by the industry. I think Bernardine Evaristo shared last year
Mm.
or so a plaque of her having sold over 1 million copies. I think they give you some kind of platinum pack, plaque or
Mm.
something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
multiply that by the amount of each book, and that gives you a sense of how much
Yeah.
her book has been able to bring in. And people will say that Bernardine is special. Not every Booker winner gets that same kind of experience. Bernardine is Bernardine. She's
Yeah.
awesome. But it gives you a sense of how much the Booker
Mhm.
Prize drives the sales of books and how much readers globally hang on the Booker to decide for them what books to hold on to
Yeah.
for the coming year.
Absolutely. And the other thing is also the Booker's kind of has this capacity to shape itself and reshape itself. So
Yeah.
it keeps mutating. And one of the big changes a few years ago, I don't know the exact date, but more in the recent past, they used to not allow the US,
Right.
just because the US is such a dominant, intense industry. And there was something interesting about that, and I almost kind of miss that
You
because
miss that.
I think I think the US writers can flood the market in a very particular way, and lose this we lose some smallness of the industry. But yeah, so the US writers are in there now. The last few years we've had some US authors win.
Mm.
I think Paul Beatty, the sellout, he
Send
was,
out, yeah.
yeah, American. So yeah, so that's another interesting thing. And they also now have the international prize, which is sort of like a
Right.
prize for the translated, the
Right.
international booker. So that's interesting, and we should consider talking about those, I guess, too, instead of just
So
being
I
Anglophones.
I think so. I know we are
Yeah,
sad, pathetic anglophone anglophiles. I
yeah,
don't know. We're
exactly.
just in the stereotypical anglophone reader who thinks that there's nothing else happening anywhere
There's
else.
no other language. Uh,
So yeah. I think we should consider
yeah.
having a session on that as well.
And then before we go into each of the novels, the judges, that's another kind of fun thing because they roll out like who the
Hmm.
judges are. And I'll be very honest, I don't know the UK scene. I don't read sort of UK newspapers, but they're very English UK
Hmm.
folks. Well, the judge this year, the head is Neil McGregor, who is a Scottish art historian, and he's in the museum world. So that's kind of interesting. It's not even like it doesn't have to be a literature expert. And then the person, so I can't predict the tastes of any of these folks, really.
His name not on it? Alema Banku.
Yes, he's the only one.
Right.
But I find him unpredictable as a personality. So
Actually, I don't know him
yeah,
as a reader, so I couldn't
yeah,
extrapolate on what Mabanku likes or what he gravitates towards. If maybe Adichie was on it, or Teju Cole was on it, or
yeah,
Akweke Mezi was on it, I feel like I can speculate on
yes.
what makes them tick. But with Mabanku, I don't know. He's interesting, but then again, the fact that we have a book like Trickle Walker in there,
Mm-hmm.
I have a feeling that if I had to guess which book Mabanku fought for, I would say that's one of the books, as well as No Violet Bulawayo's books. And we could talk about
Really?
why. Yeah, because this is a guy who wrote what's the book about porcupines,
Mm-hmm.
right? So where this the spirit animal double of a character is kind of
Yeah,
telling us the story. He's the one who wrote African Psycho, this serial killer who wants to kill somebody but somehow never can bring himself to kill somebody. Like, he writes weird stuff. So I don't
yeah.
know.
All right. By that guess, M. John Harrison is also someone who is a big proponent of speculative fiction, fantasy, and so on. So there are some their tastes are already being reflected. So I think they've arrived at this particular shortlist because of those. So anyway, so here they all are.
Okay.
And how does this? What is this
Yeah,
lens?
yeah,
Okay,
I know
so here they are, and to make some mundane observations, we have some very small novels,
yes.
minimal,
I know.
short word length, and a short page length, and then we have the big ones.
Is
Uh,
Lee Violet Bulawayo's book the biggest? Is Glory the biggest?
um, I think that Shehan Karunatilaka and Novelet Bulawayo
Are
are
kind of
neck to neck.
okay. All right, good.
You know what I mean?
See?
So yeah, there they are.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't know. Where do you wanna start? Do you want to start with Trickle Walker? Do you
Let's
want to?
start with Trickle Worker. I think since it's the strangest and it's a nice bookend to No Violet, which we are going to end with. You
Yeah,
know? Okay.
that's right. So this is the one with the shortest word length of
Okay.
all the 6 novels.
It's
Um,
shorter than Keegan's book.
Yes, by word length, but it's so the font is
I
bigger,
see.
so
Okay.
the
Okay. So
pages are a few more pages.
okay.
That's what they said on the Booker website, actually.
Okay.
But so it's written by Alan Garner, who is a sort of a thespian of these kinds of works, and they say that he kind of builds on imagery from his own region, the Cheshire region. And yeah, and this is the story of a young boy,
Mm-hmm.
Joe Coppock, who has a lazy eye.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And he is alone. We have no idea where his parents are or where there's no sense. It seems that he's very isolated, because the idea is also that we don't know whether this is real or realistic or mythological or fantasy or fable and so on. And so, and then one day, a rag and bone man stops by and says he's the Trickle Walker. And of course, I would not know this intuitively, but reading, apparently, there's a mythology here that this is a person who is a healer.
I see.
And then they go off on this journey. And while it's there's a lot of symbolic stuff that's being built up, symbolic etymology, symbolic incidents that are rooted in the mythology of the region. I'm not able to locate that. For me, I was able to think about it as a kind of Roald Dahl, Mysteries of Roald Dahl, who wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and so on. And also Roald Dahl, because my children used to read it, also has a lot of young characters that curse a lot. That
Yes, the insult. My daughter right now is reading Fantastic Mr. Fox yesterday. And
uh-huh.
she rushes from the kitchen to read a passage to us that she thought was so funny. And my husband was like, the insults were so just awful that my husband is like, what is she reading? I'm like, yeah, it's Rodal. He is the master of
Yeah.
just cringe-worthy insults.
Yeah. And I don't know if we are kind of entering some like extremely problematic commentary or something here, because there is such a massive amount of fan base that Alan Garner has. So I
I
don't know if
see.
we are misanalyzing it, but who cares? That's what it read to me, right?
Okay.
And I think it was interesting. It was a quick read. I read it in one sitting. I wasn't madly in love, let's say.
So I know that he pushes back against um people thinking of him as a children's book writer.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's something that he hasn't fully embraced.
Uh-huh.
He has a kind of ambivalent relationship to that
Mhm.
identity. He says that, at least I skimmed through his Wikipedia profile. He responded to a journalist by saying, I don't write for children, I write for myself, which
Mhm.
makes me feel as if there's a kind of very inward writing here, where it's almost as if he's the only one who understands this
Mhm.
universe that he's creating. And when you
Right.
come in, you just have to, just surrender to the rules of the world and not try to overthink it, or try to, bring, too much external framework for understanding it. And so, in that sense, he makes me think about African writers like Amos Tutuola, The Famished Road, that just creates their own mythology
Mhm.
by drawing from existing mythologies and a mix of their craziness as well.
Mhm.
I suppose my question will be, why is a book like this on the shortlist? What is bookerish about it?
So if I could answer that question, that would be that would help me out, because I don't
You don't
see
see it?
I don't see the magic of it.
Okay.
I mean, I see a real gap between the experience of reading it for me
Hmm.
and the reviewers who are saying this is just the most greatest book of all time. I mean, these are the kind of reviews
Yeah.
that I read about it. So I'm not entirely sure how to place it. Is it beautifully written? Yes. Is it rich in language? Absolutely. Does it remind me of a certain kind of colonial education and childhood, with the way in which it plays with words? Yes. Is that good? Probably. Is that great? I don't know. So I'm not sure how I feel about it.
I
It's not my favorite book, but I have an even less favorite one. So
Yeah, right. So that's the thing. I'm like, this one, I see why it's in there, as opposed to,
mhm.
I don't know, one other one that we're going to talk about in a minute. But one of the things that kept coming up when people talk about the book online is the kind of materiality of the dictionary in this world. People kept complaining that they had to check dictionaries, they had to go to Google. And I love the idea of a book that kind of returns us to
Mhm.
language,
Sure.
forces you to grapple with a word and fight with it and notice it, as opposed to just read through. And I
Mhm.
think that for a social media world where we are so used to reading, just slopping up words, just drinking up things and not even thinking about it,
Yeah.
this book is kind of fleshy in a way that I think is cool, which,
Yeah.
I would say that that's enough to give it a place on this
Mhm.
list.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think a joke that I would add is, when I was reading this book, I don't know if these were books written specifically during the lockdown, but I found that a lot of these writers, or I don't know if it's a publisher who does that, are really into playing with fonts.
Okay.
Okay. So there's a lot of font play. in this one, there's a lot of font play and actually three other ones, which
Yes.
I just find to be
Okay.
also adding to your social media thesis.
Yes, I can answer that to you. I think it is the way we think in social media. It's the way that social media is rewiring our brains. Is
Mhm.
that we are just done with a certain type of book. We are
Yes.
geared towards things that can literally break down stuff graphically to us.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to keep seeing more and more of these types
Mhm.
um, of reimagination of what the book as a technology of information is.
Yes.
But yeah. I say we move on to the. Okay, all right.
Oh, William.
Oh,
Oh, Ainehi, what did you think of this book?
okay. Let me start by telling you about William
Elizabeth
Strout.
Strout.
Is that her name? No.
Elizabeth Strout.
Elizabeth Strout. So Elizabeth Strout is an American writer. And although I had never heard of her, she is very powerful in the literary space and very well known. She
Mhm.
has written lots of books, and with the exception of maybe one of them, all of them have been on bestseller lists, have been extremely popular, and she has made millions and millions and millions of dollars from her book. Okay? Yes. And she's one of those rare people who they are loved by critics and
Yeah.
also, loved by their publishers as well, because they sell tons of books.
Mhm.
This is a novel about a woman called Lucy Barton, and she has lost her husband. He's dead. And it's essentially her relationship with her ex-husband, her first husband, who is called Williams. And when the title says, "Oh, William," it's literally an interpretation of the way she thinks about him. Oh, William, because William is pretty daft. William is also mean in his daftness, and
Mhm.
he has a very strange past. You sense that there is a secret in his world, that is maybe tied to certain kinds of historical violence. He is an awful husband. I mean, just as awful as they come. He is a serial philanderer, if I should use an archaic term, you know.
Yeah.
He essentially slips around. When the book starts, you think he's only cheated on her with one woman, and darling, as it goes on, you realize that, oh no, it was the MO of their relationship. He
Yep.
slept with so many people on the regular.
Mhm.
One of my favorite moments is when he says, "Well, I didn't have an affair with her. We just slept together a few times." Like that's supposed to be a good thing. So, the writer, what you get to know about Lucy Barton, though, is that she is actually a character featured in four of Strout's work.
Mhm.
And in the story, she keeps referring to other books that she has written. And then when I Wikipedia'd her, I realized that, oh, okay, she's literally right. Strout has written other book about her as well.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I find the character very naive, right? Which is part of her charm. But the
Yes.
writing itself is very naive and amateurish.
Yep.
Am I being too mean?
You're not being mean at all. I mean, it was also very surprising to me. And I think one of the things in her very impressive profile as a successful
Mhm.
writer is that every single one of these has been either a play or a TV movie or a full on movie.
Yes.
Oprah has supported her
Mhm.
over the years. And she's just big time. She's also married to like a mayor or something. So
Oh,
she's
okay.
she's got this whole uh, social universe that like knows about Lucy, and there was Olive Kittredge, which became a movie, and then there was Olive again. So she has built this world with sequels, and then whatever comes after the sequel, things like that. So that's what's interesting. No, I didn't love the writing. And the only reason I didn't love it is because the other writers were so much more elevated, right?
Yes.
What I know about this book is that it, to me, classifies as what they call upmarket fiction, which is a combination of a sort of which is not a genre, which is a combination of lightly written, accessibly written books on serious topics. So Little Fires Everywhere, like Celeste McGee, for example,
I
that's
see.
upmarket fiction. So to me, that's what this is. Like, this is about this woman trying to connect, and struggling to connect, and also struggling to come to terms with having grown up in this intense poverty, and then it is sort of like this New York fancy world that she inhabits. And and she's also mourning the death of her second husband. So all those themes are heavy, those themes are poignant, those themes are universal, but it lacks the punch, of course, of the others. And it has, um, yeah, like, it's the themes are grave, but the writing is not grave, so there it lacks gravitas.
It does. And I paid attention to the passages that people highlighted because I read it on Kindle.
Mhm.
And it's just this very mundane, like insta poetry, reflections on grief. Like something so simplistic about the reflection on these grave topics that she's
Yeah,
dealing with, which tells me that you're hitting on something when you say that it's written in a certain kind of very accessible way, where you say very mundane things about deep stuff, and it moves certain kinds of readers, which for me is not a problem.
no,
I don't consider myself an elitist reader at all.
sure, not me.
But I don't know if it should be on a Booker shortlist, not even a long list. So you have people like No Violet who they're literally standing on top of their heads,
Mhm.
to reimagine the novel form. And then you have this book that is a string of Insta poetry. Nothing against Insta poetry again. I teach Insta poetry and I love it. But you have a book that is a string of Insta poetry quotes and it is on the Booker. And I'm just asking, how is that possible?
I know. How is that possible? I don't know. Because now I'm trying to recall the long list, and I don't know what something else could have made it on there.
Right.
But yes, so this is not on so we are making a short list of the short list, and this is on the not list for us. For both of us. I don't know about the trickle walker where it figures. You can reveal your results later. Um, Claire Keegan, I didn't mean to do this, but we are doing like the white American and Europe, UK authors. Irish Claire Keegan, Small Things Like These.
Mhm.
Um, and Claire Keegan comes to us already very acclaimed from her novel Foster. And this is a bare bones, minimalist, moody, beautifully
Mhm.
evocative narrative, told to us primarily from the perspective of a man named Furlong, who there's a question mark around around his father. And essentially, the idea being that it kind of exposes the Irish Magdalen laundries, where these women would be stashed away when they
Pregnant.
got pregnant out of wedlock, and they were horrible. They were treated terribly, and the kids were either sent off, adopted, or also
Or
part of the labor economy. Yeah, or yeah, and then not to mention the mass deaths and things like that,
Mhm.
where they were found. So, and Furlong. So what is interesting about it is it's set during a first couple of days before Christmas, where he has a wife and four daughters.
Five
And
daughters.
how many?
Five daughters.
Five daughters. And he sort of starts to get into a mood where he starts to reflect on his life and his own wife, who doesn't have patience for digging into the past, and who doesn't really doesn't want to do this. She's a pragmatic woman. She wants to get on, and so he starts to kind of visit this convent nearby and strikes up a friendship with the young mother there, and it's very moving and very beautiful.
Yeah, I think it feels like a book, you know.
Absolutely.
Um, I, to be honest, I do not necessarily like books that are so perfectly done,
Hmm.
that are so clean,
Hmm.
and that fits the profile of, high brow literary fiction. You
Yeah.
know, I like my books a little messy. And this book is just like has Booker written all over it. It's the same way I felt about Damon Galgot's book last year.
Hmm.
It won. So I don't know, is that an indication of something?
Yeah.
Um, but I like the Christmas vibe. I like just, this dark story. It's dark, but it's set within the context of Christmas. I don't know if you're a Christmas person, the whole tree, cinnamon, hot chocolates, if you're into that,
Yeah.
the spirit of Christmas. But I think this book captures it in a way that is very moving. And
Yeah.
I watched briefly a video interview she did with Colum Toybin, another
Yeah.
Irish writer, where he was asking her, look, how do you connect the particular with the universal in storytelling? And she said that she does it through pictures, that she's
Mhm.
somebody who holds on to the power of pictures and images to convey a concept or convey an idea. She feels like if you can't grapple with the image, with the picture, then storytelling doesn't quite do what it's supposed to do. And when you read the novel, she's essentially setting the scene of this village life, by
Mhm.
the sea. And there's something visual about the story. Again, it's not about kind of a grand narrative, it's about setting up a tableau, a scene about the lives of these people through the perspective of this guy called
Mhm.
Forlong. So I thought that all of that was beautiful. It's well executed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. She also said this very beautiful thing that immediately makes you sad. I think someone asked her about like why this book is so tiny, or I don't know what. She was commenting on the length, and she said Furlong's life is so small, like his world is so small
Oh.
that it can't even accommodate like more plot or more pages. Come on. So that was something very beautiful. But you're right, it has an extraordinary finesse. It's not messy at all. The only critique, if one has to offer, is that there's something abrupt about how it ends, that it required a little more, just a little more. So, so I don't agree with her. I think she could have thrown in 5 more pages to end a little more, little, less abruptly. Uh,
Right. Yeah.
and yeah, so I think this is in my short list of the short list.
It's in there for me.
Yeah, it's in there. I think you're right. It feels like a Booker book, but it's also just one of those very affecting books. You feel affected by it, you know,
It's yeah.
uh, and it really sets the mood. And I'm not a Christmas person, but I felt like being one reading that. I
Yeah.
just wanted to cheer up this guy, poor fellow. I wanted to make pies with those girls.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful book. I think that's all
Mhm.
I'll say. But I also think that it's one of those books that they are so beautiful and so perfect that they are also maybe not the most memorable books.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? You don't read them and say, oh my God, my life was changed, and tell everybody you
great.
meet you have to read it. You're just like, okay, if I were a creative writing professor, I will give you an A plus 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 plus. Okay,
Yeah,
but you know, that's it.
yeah,
I don't know. Maybe that's also too harsh, but I
yeah.
I think I just wasn't super moved by this.
I have to say this. The other thing is that I've been tracking the career of Sally Rooney. and I've read Normal People, and I'm sorry, like, that's a kind of, and it's a great show and it's a fun book, but I would rather take this Irish fiction over that.
Wow.
It felt more meaningful. All right, you choose the next.
Who do we have left? Oh, let's do let's keep the post-colonial people for the
At the
end.
end.
Yes.
We have entered the war zone though, like with the Ireland,
I suppose, yeah.
yeah,
We get in the boy, yeah. Okay. Percival.
the other war zone,
Yes.
United States of America and
Yes.
racism. Okay, you want to start?
So Percival Everett is a fascinating guy. I was intrigued by his life as well. He's a a literature professor, which, if you know anything about us, we are not the most, creative writing people in the world, but he's actually a successful literature professor as well as a successful novelist.
As in,
And
he's not a creative writing professor, you mean?
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
he was described as a literature professor. I don't know. Don't quote me
Yeah.
though.
Yeah.
He has written 34 books or so he's very
Oh my
prolific.
God.
And 22 of those, I think, are novels.
Mm,
And he actually has a book coming out this year.
yeah.
I think another person who has that is Keegan, either Keegan or the Trickle guy have a book coming out this year as well.
Yeah.
He's working hard, and this story is kind of a mashup of genre.
Hmm.
It tells a story of a series of deaths or murders, right?
Hmm.
And they all have a certain kind of aesthetic feature to them. A white man is killed in a way that the body is mangled, and next to this body is a black man whose body has been mutilated beyond recognition, holding the testicle of the white man in his hands. So, as you can already tell, this is a novel in which you have this very gruesome representation of violence.
Yeah.
But the problem is that anytime these white men are killed, the same black corpse appears, disappears, and reappears.
Yep.
And it leads to this kind of national frenzy. And there are these black detectives who are assigned to handle the case. And so
Mhm.
it's this book that is dissecting American racism, but within the context of this very rich, generic exploration.
Right.
I was fascinated by it. I think it keeps you going. It's gripping. I mean, it's about murders. It's like True Detective on steroids,
Mhm.
um, and it's also satirical. There's a ton of humor in it. So it's really this, I would say, delicious soup of different elements,
Yeah.
which makes it very readable.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I'm just going to add one thing to that, which is something that I love about this year's Booker shortlist is the laugh out loud humor. I mean,
Yeah.
this book is, as you said, a genre mashup. It's a crime procedural. It's a murder thing. It's a historical fiction because all these murders eventually connect to Emmett Till. It's his relatives. The relatives of the murderers of Emmett Till are the ones being killed off, and there is the idea that Emmett Till is come back from the afterlife and doing this, right, and it's a laugh out loud book, zinger after zinger after zinger. Every single name is an allegorical name, and they're very funny. Like there's a detective called Henrietta Hind. There is a British woman called Helvetica, and then she marries a person, and her name becomes Helvetica New, which is the font. Uh,
Yeah, and then
there is a
the
Till
king,
and Bickle, huh?
the guy who they have junior, 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 and then triple J, junior, junior, junior.
Yeah, absolutely. So it just goes on, and there's a lot going on here also in terms of mixed race, politics of mixed race. And I think the only critique I would have is that it kind of comes apart a little bit for me in the end, except one has to get to the end because there is the most hilarious and horrifying speech given by President Trump, and because it's written very much during that particular moment, and and he's named as the president, and Melania is named, and it is an out of control, absolutely hilarious speech. So it's a great novel. It's very heavy in dialogue, which is the issue, which is not an issue, but which is also the characteristic of this Sri Lankan novel. And it's very, very funny, and in the way that you are laughing, and you're also kind of like, just like, you don't want to laugh because everything else is so gruesome.
Right.
So yes, it's a great book, and this is the kind of writer I would say, if he gets this accolade, even though he has 34 books in total, he flies under the radar. And at the end of the day, he produces a lot, and he produces very wide variety of genres, and giving him the Booker for this would resemble honoring a very prolific career.
Right. Right. Which is why I think he's definitely a contender, right?
Absolutely.
Because I could see the thinking being, look, his book is amazing.
Yeah.
His book treats an issue that is very much top of mind in our day, right? Racism. Yeah. And he does this in this spectacularly brilliant way.
Mm-hmm.
But then he sort of had this career that has been understated. So
Yeah.
this is his moment. We have to give him his flowers this year. So I could see them thinking that way. As well as what Garner as well, right? Garner is the oldest person to ever be longlisted for the prize.
And it's going to be his birthday on Monday, apparently.
So they may just let's just give him a fun birthday and give him this prize.
Yeah.
So we are seeing veterans who are not only brilliant writers, but their career may actually also play in their favor, in the sense that, they should be recognized for having had a long career, versus people like No Violet, who this is her second book. She still has many Booker shortlists in her before she gets to 87, So
this is a compassionate speech, Ainehi, but the Booker judges rarely think like that. Okay, so if you're listening, bring us the compassion this year.
But I do think that he's a contender, because this feels like the kind of mix of very excellent craftsmanship, but kind of the sprinkle of messiness that you need to make a book kind of jump out to you.
Yeah. All right. Yes. So one in the top 3 for me.
Okay.
My shortlist of my shortlist. All right, The Seven Moons of Mali Almeida, written by Sri Lankan Shehan Karunatilaka, and this is his second novel, and the first one actually got the Commonwealth Prize. So he has a lot of accolades, and this is a novel that has been described, that I would describe as graveyard lit. Literally, it's written from the perspective of a ghost, and we are in this afterlife, and the bodies have stacked up in the Sri Lankan civil war, and Malinda Almeida is dead, and he has no idea how he is dead. He wonders why he's woken up, and everywhere there are these ghouls and ghosts, and they're having all this witty banter, and it's all very funny, but it's like this gallows humor the whole time. and he has 7 moons, that is 7 days, to find a way to somehow he's a photographer. He's a gay photographer who has been photographing the war, and he has a box of photographs stashed away. And that stash needs to be found because it could expose something large. And so we have him go from location to location, trying to figure out what happened to the box. Along the way, we meet his clandestine secret lover, Dylan, and his best friend, Jackie. And we also end up on this adventure, all the way really punctuated by the horror and the violence of the Sri Lankan Civil War. So it's set in the 80s. And he there's all these rules he needs to play by. He's allowed like a certain amount of whispers in somebody else's ears, things like that. And there's a lot of humor, and it's also like filled with all these 80s references to music and stuff like that, which I certainly recognize. And this is a top-notch book. My criticism would be that it is could have required a little bit of pulling back. Could have pulled back a bit. I was joking. 5 moons might have been enough. We didn't need all 7. And I think it could have done with some tightening. And to me, this is exciting because it has the formal confidence of somebody like Salman Rushdie, without the Islamophobia and without the sexism. So that's a winning combination for me. And it has this intense humor, which with Salman Rushdie, I love reading his stuff, but the sexism kills me, and the Islamophobia kills me. So I have this combination in this guy, and I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I laughed and I cried.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I love the idea of the bureaucracy of the afterlife, where it's not this kind of pretty, ghostly, angelic, freely universe, but it's as stark and frustrating as being in a DMV for to go get your driver's license.
Yeah.
I like that kind of naturalism.
Hmm.
I mean, I am partial to books like this as opposed to Keegan's book, right?
Yeah.
We are both exploring a historical context of violence.
Hmm.
But Keegan's is just too soft. It's like at the end of the book, she says between 1925 and 1961, they found that at one of these Magdalene laundries, 796 babies had died. Like this is violence in a large scale. And then I don't know, the book we are using to explore it is a book that sort of speaks in whispers about this history of violence. I think something about not just post-colonial writers, but post-colonial writers of color is that they go hard when it comes to exploring the archaeology of violence in history.
Yeah.
And this kind of elaborate world making and world building. I mean, I think it's a thing about just the way our people write, that there is this really deeply layered imagination of worlds. And this book definitely represents that.
So also we're going to get cancelled because the Irish firmly believe they are part of the post-colonial.
No, they are, right? But they're also Western. I'm sorry.
Oh my God, of course, and white.
Yeah, and white. And so there is a way that imaginary just constructs narrative. And I think that if you're coming from an African space, a South Asian space, you are dipping into indigenous storytelling modes that just really, build worlds that are in your face, and I love that.
Yeah. I dig that. I love that. All right. So, all right, we'll come to Glory, which is the one to root for, as we've been told, but we can debate that. Yeah. Do you want to start with Glory by No Violet Bulawayo?
Sure. So Glory is by Zimbabwean novelist No Violet Bulawayo. This is her second novel.
Mhm.
And her first novel is God, what's the title again? We Need New Names. And it was part of her short story that won her the Kane Prize that year. I think it's called Hitting Budapest or something like that.
Mhm.
And this is her second novel, and it is completely different from the first one. So the
Mhm.
novel is about Mugabe's
Mhm.
dismissal from power, right? The coup that was not a coup that took him out of power. I think 2017, 2017, right?
Yeah.
And one day we woke up and, you know, Mugabe had been ousted from power. And of course, social media went crazy. Africa's social media went crazy. I cannot even imagine how crazy Zimbabwean social media was at the time.
Yeah.
And she said in an interview that Brittle Paper is going to publish next week, she said that she was kind of rifling through social media at the time, and
Mhm.
she planned on writing a nonfiction piece
Mhm.
about, you know, the whole drama around Mugabe's ousting. But then, you know, all the think pieces started pouring in.
Yeah.
And then she was just like, you know what? I'm going to do fiction. And as she read through the comments by lots of Zimbabweans on Twitter and Facebook, she kept coming across the connection between Animal Farm and what was happening in Zimbabwe at the time. And that was where the spark came to write an animal story exploring the context around Mugabe's ousting and the aftermath of that, right?
Mhm.
And so it begins with the animal called Old Horse, who is also, you know, Mugabe,
Yeah.
giving a speech. And we learn about his wife, who is called Old Donkey,
Mhm.
and just, you know, her desire to be in government. And
Mhm.
then the story takes us through the new government that takes Mugabe's place, and how it becomes simply a repetition of the same cycle of violence and exploitation. But it also chronicles the attempt to push back against this new government and the ways in which it was exploiting the people. All the
Mhm.
characters are animals. So when people talk about the novel, the first thing that comes to their mind is Animal Farm.
Mhm.
But Animal Farm is not, of course, the only reference for the book.
No kidding.
Ye-
You know, it's made me crazy, this
I'm
reference.
telling you, I feel like the amount of Twitter conversations have been drawn into trying to say that, yes, Animal Farm is one of the influences, is one of the genealogies, but No Violet is coming from a culture with
Mhm.
a massive indigenous literary archives of animal stories. And she
Absolutely.
has said that this archive was also a huge influence in how she created this fictional world.
Mhm.
So that's one thing. Another thing that you need to know about this book is that it is structured unconventionally. So it's broken into, I don't know what to call it, vignettes, into these little subheadings.
Yeah.
So it's very fragmented. And that takes us back to what we were saying about the trickle walker. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see if you can show people what it looks like.
Yeah. Go on.
Yeah. And that's so it's broken down into these bits and pieces.
Mhm.
And it's fascinating because you can choose to start the story from the beginning to the end. But to be honest, you can start from anywhere and you will still get something out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The vignettes are.
Not it's not a it's kind of structured in a linear way, but you can read it in a non-linear way. It's
Yeah.
like jumping on your Twitter feed. There is no beginning, there is no end. If you
Yeah.
spend 2 minutes on Twitter, you will get something from it. This book works like that as well. And it
Yeah.
also, of course, includes a lot of Twitter, you know, quotes and things like that. So it's doing a lot at the level of form and aesthetics. I
Mhm.
would say of all the books here, this is the one book that is really messing with the novel as a form. And I think that for that alone, she deserves her flowers.
All right. I
Yes.
was thrilled to come to your TED talk. And
Jumping off my soapbox now. Applause.
okay, I will add a couple more thoughts. I agree with almost everything you said, especially about the formal elements. Let me come back to convention
Okay.
also, because there are also very conventional things that are going on. And those conventions are that this is very deliberately a novel of nation. It's a
Okay.
novel of a Zimbabwe nation. This is wonderful. This is a
Mhm.
good thing. We need more, because those are the novels that get all the accolades. So we want that, so that it has this epic quality of the narration of a nation's troubles, a nation's history. It has elements of a historical novel, attempt to recreate, or to resurrect, or to bring back the figure of Nehanda, for
Mhm.
example.
Right.
And you have the very beautifully drawn out character of Destiny. I believe it's a goat.
Yes.
Um,
Is Destiny a good? Yes, Destiny is a good.
Destiny is a goat, and you have a Destiny who takes on this. She becomes the sort of allegory of nation. She takes on this. She's going to form the new nation, and she goes ahead and starts this revolt, and it's a moving story what happened to her family. So there is an attempt at rehistoricizing, reframing, redressing history. So that's great. I also like the collective protagonist, to write as a collective choral protagonist. I think that was also formally interesting, formally innovative, and it's hard to do. And so I appreciate that. The theme of the Booker being humor, she gets full
Oh
points. A
God,
lot of
it is so
humor.
hilariously
Yeah,
funny. Like
it's very,
I'm
very funny.
talking so funny, like bowled over laughing funny.
Yeah. I was more bowled over laughing funny with the Percival Everett, but I think she's also just as it's got a lot of humor, because it's also leaning on satire. So here there's genre mashups coming up. I would say that my critique of the novel is that the animals lack animalness, and I don't know why they are animals if they are not. They are simply they just do everything almost exactly like humans. I don't think there is an attempt to draw out their animal characteristics, except in the figure of the crocodile at the end. But otherwise, I could be reading about humans. You know what I mean? They're not doing a lot with their bodies, and that's an issue for me. And so I don't know what the animals offer. And so I think it's also kind of placed somewhere between speculative fiction and animal fable, and it doesn't deliver for me on either. I think it should have been a full on, I think it should have developed one or the other genre. This is where I think the genre mashup is a problem for me.
Right. But it's always a problem when authors mix and match genres, right? Because it just never resolves into something that a reader can hold on to.
Yeah.
So which is why I think it's a problem that is inherent to the form itself. And I can live with that.
Sure.
And I also think that the animals feel like animals in African folk tales. I
Mhm.
mean, the tortoise isn't tortoise like. The tortoise just does stuff, right? And
Mhm.
so I'm thinking that maybe that is the African folktale form, right? That ultimately this is a story where animals are simply being used as a context to explore larger questions. And so they seem very allegorical, which is what you're pushing against, as opposed to being actual animals who.
Yes, because I mean, I would say, the Jataka tales is a very common fable form in India, which is very similar to the Aesop's fables, where you have the animal and it's a parable like thing. There's a moral lesson at the end, right? But those are short, and because they are short, you can't dwell on
Right,
the
right.
detail. But within a lengthy narrative, when they're just as everybody else, going to school, getting in a car, driving down a highway, and things like that, one starts to, and there's so much realism in it that it starts to kind of, I don't know, it starts to kind of fall apart slightly for me about why they're animals.
By
It's
the
just,
animals.
yeah, it's fine. I mean, it's okay. I mean, it works at the end of the day, but
Right. And so I would say, as you're talking, I'm trying to think what is a novel that does what you're talking about. I would say maybe actually Kafka's Metamorphosis, in the sense that the actual body of the bug is part of the story. His difficulty coming down from the bed, from the bed, his voice getting thinner. There's a way that the fleshiness of the bug
yeah.
is what drives the narrative.
So
And I agree with you that this isn't there with this book.
yeah, and I was also thinking, like, when you create an alternate universe, like in Lagoon, Okafor's Lagoon, for example, I enjoyed the creatureliness of the creatures,
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think that's where some of
Nice,
the
nice.
stuff. But of course, I'd be happy if she wins. I mean, it's time.
I think she deserves it. I am just a sucker for writers who go all out, no
Hmm.
matter how imperfectly
Hmm.
it's put together. I celebrate and luxuriate in the risk taking of
Yeah,
forcing us to rethink what the novel is capable of doing. And I think that this book does it in a very bold way, that I think puts her as a pretty strong contender.
yeah,
So I think we are at the end, maybe we could pull out the crystal balls now.
yeah. Do you
And
want to go?
no, I think you should go because I feel like you are more intuitive about these things.
I don't have the intuition this year because I actually found it very hard to pick. And if I was the judge, I would do a double booker uh,
Mhm.
for for the new love of my life, Shehan Karuna Tilaka, and Claire Keegan with the extraordinary perfection, the excess and the minimal. And so I would, so yeah, there's a part of me that feels like, how are they planning to choose? And if I have to, I'm unable to predict really between these two. But I think if one has to, if I have to really kind of think who it might be, I think this, I think Karuna Tilaka, Seven Moons of Mali Almeida, simply because the booker loves a good South Asian novel. So bring it home, So I don't know. I'm not sure, but it could just as well go to Claire Keegan.
Okay. For me, if I wanted to be pragmatic,
Hmm.
I would say Claire Keegan.
Yeah.
But it's also a tiny book. I don't know. There's just
So
something
small.
inconsequential about its smallness.
Oh my gosh. I know.
Did that sound too mean? I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm just like, I'm sorry if you're going to explore histories of violence, like you have to go grand, you have to come. Anyway,
Hmm. Okay.
so but if I want to follow my heart, I
Hmm.
would say it's between Seven Moons
Hmm.
and Glory.
Yeah.
Um Glory, just because I think I feel like one of the ballsiest books in the collection.
Hmm.
Um, and also because I am rooting for her, because why would I not root to her? I am an African and I have undying love for her. And I think that the book should win.
Yeah.
Seven Moons, I think why I believe it's very likely to win is because a South Asian writer hasn't won in a while.
Oh my God, is that true? I
Right?
feel like they're constantly winning, but I
Right.
not the Booker maybe.
Yeah, but no, not in a good while, I don't think.
You have a challenge from Julian Okot here. Do novels have to be doorstoppers? Sure.
Um, like how do they mean like do they
Like,
always have to?
because you're talking about the small novel being small.
Oh, I see. Okay. No, no. No, they don't always have to be. But that means that their impact is different. I don't know. I'm not a fan of subtlety and
Yeah.
smallness in storytelling. And that
Yeah.
maybe again is coming from a certain kind of tradition. I like novels that, that come big and
Yeah.
build vast worlds for you.
Mhm.
But again, that's just my interest as a scholar and as a reader.
Mhm.
That's so a South Asian writer hasn't won in a while, and it appears that Sri Lankan writers are loved by the shortlist. They keep, appearing in there, but somehow they're not
Yeah.
winning, at least not in a good.
Because Sri Lanka produces a prolific amount of incredible literature. This is like, Palestine and Sri Lanka, outside of like, stuff like African literary cultural studies that I tend to do scholarship on. But Sri Lankan and Palestinian literature, I just have this soft spot for. And it's like this intense war literature
I'm
because it's
telling
just such a.
you. Yeah, and
Yeah.
and the many ways that they can build imaginative worlds around the question of war and violence beats me. They just have this inexhaustible
Yeah.
archive of just storytelling forms that I don't know. I think I can see
Cool.
the significance of this
Yeah.
book winning. My heart goes is rooting for Bulawayo, but
Sure.
if I had to be pragmatic, I would say I would throw my money not even on Keegan but on Seven Moons.
Okay. So yeah, so we're both saying Seven Moons of Mali Almeida. My heart is for Mali Almeida, the Seven Moons book, but I worry about this uh, beating out all our beating everyone out. But anyway, this was wonderful. And
So far.
sorry about the technical issues before, but hopefully people can watch the recording, and I will also turn it into a podcast. So I'll put it all out soon.
Good. This was great as well. Bhakti, it's always fun to share space with you and fight and quarrel and talk about books. And I love this because this is literally the conversations we have,
Yeah.
on WhatsApp, when we meet in
Absolutely.
festivals. This
Mhm.
is us talking.
Totally.
I'm happy that we bring the same kind of joy that we have for book to the space. And thanks to everybody who stopped by to watch. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Bye.